who mean a whole lot to us. And for me, it certainly are the businesses across the country who we are doing everything we possibly can to serve you, through this very difficult time. And since the very beginning of this pandemic, and we promised that we would listen to businesses and that we would respond and make adjustments as we needed to make them based on the response we heard from you. So I really want to thank businesses for being so open with your feedback, because as you all know, the pandemic hit us and fairly quickly, and we needed to make sure that we got supports out to the Canadian people, and we've been making adjustments along the way. And certainly in Newfoundland and Labrador, I mean, at the beginning of 2020, from the snowstorm to, of course, the current challenge of the pandemic, we know that your region is particularly, it's been particularly difficult for your businesses and in the region. And we've heard from many of them, certainly through the good members of Parliament who represent the area and share your lived experiences to help us with the programs and the support, and we really just appreciate that. And here is sort of in three sort of big themes in terms of what we heard from businesses right from the very beginning. You needed some cash flow, some operating funds, because at the end of the day, you still have bills to pay, despite the fact that you've had to scale back your operations, or for this year, you haven't been able to start your operations in the way that you've been able to do in previous years. So right away, we did something that we could do, which is to defer tax payments. So things like the GST or the HST, businesses that pay customs duties, we just, and for businesses that do trade, of course, that will matter a lot. So just to help businesses keep their costs low. So we did a number of those deferrals, and just to give you an order of magnitude, I mean, that helps about little over 3 million businesses across the country. It's equivalent to a $30 billion interest-free loan just by doing sort of that one thing. Of course, we introduced the small business account, the emergency business account in CEBA. That's $40,000 interest-free, and $10,000 of that is forgivable if you're able to pay it back by the end of 2022. We've made a couple of adjustments to that, bringing the payroll threshold down, and then now making the eligibility for CEBA a lot more broader, again, in response to what businesses have told us. So a sole proprietor businesses that might use contractors, rather than a payroll, businesses that might have structured themselves where they're paying, their staff through dividends. So we've, so making it more accessible and broader of a category so that businesses can take advantage of this. And to give you sort of a sense of, of the take up, about 650,000 businesses now across the country. So that's really good. 650,000 businesses across the country are taking advantage of this small business loan. And I think that really is helping. It speaks to the need of businesses needing to have some of that cash flow support to help them through this period. And of course, in Newfoundland and Labrador, the fisheries industry is very much like it's so much a part of Newfoundland and Labrador, and we know that that there were businesses, in fisheries who could not access CEBA. So there we created the my good colleague, the Minister of Fisheries, Minister Jordan, launched the Fish Harvester Grant. So that pays a non-repayable support of up to $10,000 to each self-employed fish harvester. And we also know that keeping teams together is really important. That's the second theme that I heard from businesses. Help me pay my bills, help me keep my people. Because even if we've had to scale back, we know that when we need to get to recovery, our biggest asset are our people. So help us with that. So across the country, we introduced the wage subsidy support. That's a 75% subsidy support. If you are a business that need to keep your employees, but you're seeing revenue decrease, and for this, we have extended this until August as the provinces across the country are slowly doing their restart. I think the wage subsidy is going to be particularly important because businesses will be able to utilize that in rehiring staff for those that have laid people off. And we're certainly encouraging that, and that support is there. And again, for fish harvesters who, couldn't access the wage subsidy because of the way we calculated the decline in revenue, we created the fish harvester benefit, which of course covers 75% of a fish harvester's income. And also to further support fishers and fish processors in St. John's and communities across Newfoundland and Labrador, we created the Canadian Seafood Stabilization Fund, which is helping with financing and support to the sector so that the sector can adapt to the current changes. And with respect to the remaining needs that I know Newfoundland and Labrador and the businesses there need, we created, this will be familiar to Atlantic Canada. ACOA is a great agency that helps businesses in the Atlantic region. So there we created the Regional Relief Recovery Fund. That fund is overall across the country about $1 billion, and of course in the Atlantic region. So for Newfoundland, Labrador, it's available through ACOA. And for Atlantic Canada, this one-time relief fund is about $110 million. So that will be additional help to help our small and medium-sized businesses. And of course, so keeping your people, paying your bills, keeping your costs low. With respect to keeping your costs low and paying the bills, rent support, commercial rent. I know that for a lot of businesses, commercial rent is a big expense. Having grown up in a family business myself, all of my young life, I know that those expenses are tough, and rent is an important one. So this one here, even though rent falls into provincial responsibility, the federal government stepped up, worked with the provinces so that we can provide that support, which is a 75% reduction support to small business owners that are the hardest hit. Now, this does require the landlord and to apply for this, and it's advantageous for the landlord. I mean, the landlord wants the stability of that income from their small business tenant, and they certainly don't want the small business tenant to be in such hardship that they can no longer be a tenant. So I'm encouraging, as the Prime Minister, everybody has encouraged landlords to please take advantage of this program, because you get 50% forgivable loan in there, and it means that, more importantly, you get to pass on that 75% reduction to your small business tenant. So you both win here. And the applications, of course, opened last week across the country. We're encouraging people to apply there. The money will start going in. In fact, I think money flows in for those who applied last week as early as this week. And it really does make financial sense, of course, to the small business tenant with the 75% reduction, but certainly to the landlord as well. And throughout this crisis, we're doing whatever it takes to help Canadian businesses and all Canadians. And I'm also the Minister of International Trade, so making sure that I'm working with our international partners to keep trade and supply chains open, particularly for essential goods and services, medical supplies, so that we can have the stability and the predictability in that global trading system during this critical time. And so from the range of supports I just talked about for small businesses, we also know that there are women-owned enterprises, Indigenous-led enterprises, young entrepreneurs, innovative, high-growth companies. Some you're going to see in, some who actually are there in St. John's. I mean, who were born out of Memorial and doing some really amazing work. So making sure that that many of, like all of our small businesses, are supported is certainly our objective, and our goal. Our goal is to save as many Canadian jobs and as many businesses as we possibly can in the face of this crisis. And given the take-up of the various programs, I think that that by and large, that help and that support is getting directly to people and getting directly to small businesses, which is what I care a lot about. And I know that that my colleagues who represent the different areas in Newfoundland and Labrador care equally. So and their voices have been really important. Your voices have been really important as businesses, the Board of Trade, the chambers. So thank you so much for giving me the time. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and just know this, that we've got your back, and we're going to keep working together, because it really has taken Team Canada to flatten this curve, and it's also going to take Team Canada to get us on that road to recovery as well. So, so thank you, and I look forward to the conversation with you, Rhonda, and with you, Andrew.
Thank you, Minister Ng. I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to hand it right over to Chair and Moderator Andrew Wadden to jump into the questions that we have for you today, Minister. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Minister Ng, for your opening comments. We very much appreciate it. We appreciate your time. I know you're headed off to the House when we're done here today, so I won't talk too much before we get into the questions. I know that up until this point in the pandemic, there's been a lot of emphasis, and you spoke to it just then, about stabilizing our economy and making sure people can keep their jobs. I'm glad to hear you referenced at the end of your comments recovery, because recovery is going to look a lot different perhaps than stabilization. I'm glad to know that you and your government have turned your minds to that. Again, not a lot of time. Let's get right into the questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The first one has to do with direct investment in Newfoundland and Labrador. As you know, it's no secret the business community here has been hit very hard. Some have referred to it as the 1-2 punch, especially on the Avalon, with the state of emergency that we started our year off with. The impacts COVID-19 of having been the other part of that punch. It's been a difficult time for the economy here. We've seen the federal government make investments in other provinces. You know, Alberta, Saskatchewan are examples. We don't need to get into them. Certain parts of Ontario have received funding through various economic development agencies. Does the federal government have any plans for direct investment in small and medium-sized businesses in Newfoundland and Labrador?
Yeah, thanks so much, Andrew, for that. You know, the supports that that I spoke of in my remarks, I think they're sort of a bit repeating, and the reason for that is that it's really important to me that we are very, very attuned to businesses and their needs during this difficult time, and as we are, you know, and as the different parts of the province, like as you're restarting sort of slowly and carefully, of course, always considering health as the top priority, which I know everyone is, and this is why we're sort of taking a slow, like, you know, sort of steady, you know, a steady approach to this, so that we don't squander the gains that we made in flattening this curve, which I think is really, which is why we're all here to begin with. That the loan supports that are out to, you know, to all businesses, and making sure that they're adjusted so that small businesses in Newfoundland and Labrador can get access to them was really, really important. ACOA, in the Regional Relief Recovery Fund, there is this, you know, this is that very unique support, and I think that provinces like Newfoundland and Labrador, you know, really stand to benefit from this, because for one thing, it's administered through ACOA, so there's a real understanding to the needs of Atlantic Canada, in particular Newfoundland and Labrador. And there's two components to it. I mean, one is to support small and medium-sized businesses, so that's sort of just sort of, you know, there's sort of just like there's two parts. One is a general support for, you know, products and services for small and medium-sized businesses, and the other one is through your CBDCs, the Atlantic Association of Community Business Development, so that small Main Street businesses in those communities can, like your restaurants, like your retailers, and those small establishments in your remote and rural communities across the region, can access some of this funding support through the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund.
Okay, thanks, Minister. We appreciate that answer. And look, of course, as you know, the $110 million that's been invested via an economic development agency like ACOA has not gone unnoticed. We just want to make sure the federal government does keep their eyes and their ears attuned, rather, to small and medium-sized enterprises, not just in Atlantic Canada, but in Newfoundland as well. Thank you for your comments on that.
Yeah. You've got some strong advocates there.
Yeah, we hear from them too.
Yeah.
I want to turn to the wage subsidy and the response benefit. You know, one of the things you said in your comments at the outset was a comment to the effect, I think, of helping me keep my people, is a statement you hear a lot from people in business. Minister, early data has sort of shown that there has been low participation in the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and high usage of the emergency response benefit. And many of our members are telling us that this has created, in their view, some labour shortage issues for them, so as some workers elect to avail of the CERB. Bottom line, I guess, to put it as simply as possible, the response benefit has been more popular than the wage subsidy to an extent. The response benefit is vital, no question, we get it. But how can we ensure that businesses are able to access the workforce while still, of course, respecting the need for government programs like the CERB to help our economy?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I mean, and you know, I always sort of remind people why CERB was created. It's created as a temporary support so that Canadians could very quickly do what they needed to do in this country to flatten this curve. So we didn't want people to worry about putting food on the table and having a roof over their head in those very absolutely sort of extreme situation. And the global pandemic is an extreme situation. It needed an extraordinary response, so that's why CERB is there. But as you know, as businesses begin to restart, and of course restart safely, this is why we extended the wage subsidy support, so that businesses have until, you know, they know that they can plan to the end of August. And look, the work isn't done just at end of August, right? I mean, right now on wage subsidy, we're listening to businesses, we're consulting with businesses, and on what the wage subsidy might need to look like beyond August the 31st. So we're listening to businesses so we can adapt it in such a way that will really help with that recovery. So I would encourage businesses who have a perspective about that to for sure share that with us. But I think as the economy and as businesses begin to restart, and I'm encouraging businesses to take it, you know, make available the wage subsidy so that they can be helped with that expense of paying for their people. And most of the people I've talked to, I mean, I think people want to work. I think that as the businesses start getting out there and that they're restarting, then that predictability of, you know, of the job and the safety net of being attached to an employer is going to also start coming back as well. I mean, I think people are still worried about, you know, about health, but, you know, but again, I mean, you hear from the health minister, you see that testing is coming up, and, you know, the health situation is being managed. And I think as Canadians and as Newfoundland Labradors, like Labradorians get accustomed to, you know, to a confidence that the health situation is, you know, is moving in the right direction. Businesses begin to slowly restart. Our supports are in there to help our businesses in that restart. It includes people. So we, you know, I sort of remind people that the CERB is it was a temporary, very extraordinary measure to do something very extraordinary in this country. But the wage subsidy is there, and it has been extended because we do want to be able to support the restart of our businesses in this country.
Okay, thank you, Minister. And I know, speaking from many of our members on this issue, that they are, if not ready, getting set to be ready to bring back workers in the safest way possible, and they're looking forward to doing that. Let me move to a question more on the potential tax issue. A few weeks ago, the Parliamentary Budget Officer of Canada testified before the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. And during that testimony, it was revealed that the federal debt could reach a total of $1 trillion this year. The question, I suppose, is, does government have a plan to stabilize our debt and spending to ensure that business does not have to endure substantial tax increases in a post-COVID world?
Yeah, very, very good question. And I guess I'll share, like, the focus right now has absolutely been to make sure that we are doing everything we can to manage the pandemic and to keep Canadians safe. And you know, as I said earlier, I mean, the measures included things like the CERB or the CEBA loan or the wage subsidy, which is to keep people safe, but also make sure that they're not worrying about things like food on the table, and keeping businesses being able to manage and bridge through this period. And we've always said that we absolutely want to be transparent with Canadians. Right now, to date, the direct spending in direct support to Canadians is $152 billion. Our commitment absolutely is making sure that we are open and transparent with Canadians, because that's what Canadians deserve. I would also sort of say that before COVID-19 hit, Canada had one of the strongest, like Canada had a strong economy. We have one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios in the G7 countries. We are strong, we were strong, and that's what's given us this ability to be able to manage through this period. But our commitment will be to absolutely be transparent with Canadians about what it is that we're doing, how it is that we're, we're spending the money. And we will need to continue to be transparent with Canadians as we get through this period to protect, to protect Canadians, but also to get on that road to economic recovery.
Okay, thank you very much. We just, and that question obviously is aimed towards us. Just, I don't know, you've heard this more than once. We just want to let you know that the, our business community would have a very difficult time shouldering the burden of further tax implications, and as long as you can be transparent, that's certainly that's very much appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
I want to move to, and some questions have come in rather on the chat that I've looked at very briefly on this particular topic, and that's commercial rent assistance. You mentioned at the outset in your comments. I know applications opened just very recently. We know how hard the federal government is working on all these programs, including the secret, what they've implemented. That has been one of the most anticipated programs, no doubt. However, across the country, we are seeing that there have been fairly low participation rates, lower than perhaps expected. And I know that you're doing a great job of encouraging landlords to apply, encouraging people to become involved in that program. We're wondering, is government considering any amendments to the program to assist tenants and landlords?
Yeah, this, you're absolutely right. I am encouraging landlords to take advantage of this. I'm also encouraging my provincial colleagues who, where rent is sort of in that provincial jurisdiction, to use, to use complementary tools to ensure that this program is successful. Across Atlantic Canada, for example, with the exception of Newfoundland and Labrador, there are, other provincial governments have implemented commercial rent freezes. And yesterday we saw, sort of some signaling, some strong signaling that way as well by the provincial government in British Columbia. Here's what I would say. We have been listening very, very intently to small businesses because, because our goal is to save as many jobs and as many businesses as possible and to support our businesses through this. But I would, I would encourage landlords to absolutely take advantage of the program. I would also encourage my provincial colleagues to also use use complementary tools to ensure that this program is successful, because we have worked together. We've worked together, and it would be really good to see that this program really is serving the small businesses as it's intended. I've always sort of said this is a Team Canada approach. We've done this as Team Canada right from the get-go, certainly on the health situation. And I think that with everything, it's Team Canada, and the landlords have a role to play here too. Okay.
Thanks very much. I know we're closing in on our time limit. We don't have too much left here. Our friends at the Newfoundland and Labrador Oil and Gas Industries Association knew we had this coming up, and they asked us if we would reference some of the issues very germane to them as well, germane to all of us really. Many small and medium-sized enterprises help compose the province's offshore oil and gas, and many of those businesses, family-owned, solely focused on supply and service of the offshore. We know the provincial government and industry associations have requested the federal government to provide incentives to help an industry in crisis remain globally competitive and save those small to medium-sized enterprises. Can you give us an idea, Minister Ng, if your government will support the requests of the provinces and the industry, or this province, rather?
Yeah, well, on this one, I'm going to give a lot of shout out to, to a Newfoundlander, which is the Minister of Natural Resources in O'Regan. Minister O'Regan has been working very hard on behalf of the energy sector, as well as as well as for his home province, to make sure that there is support for the sector, and that there is also support for those small and medium-sized businesses in the sector. We put some additional lending out that we think will be helpful to the energy sector in particular. And the answer to this question is that we're going to, of course, we're going to continue doing the work, because the sector is it's incredibly important to the national economy. And we invested in what we call sort of the emissions reduction fund, and this is to support workers in the energy sector. And there's $750 million that is there, and that applies to Newfoundland, Labrador, of course, and the various measures that are out there for the small and medium-sized businesses absolutely apply to the energy sector as well. And some of the companies will need sort of something by way of sort of larger liquidity. So we've put some larger liquidity out through BDC and EDC as well to help the sector. So you've got a strong advocate there, and I believe the work continues.
Thank you, Minister Ing. And yes, we know we've got a good advocate in Minister O'Regan. He's been responsive to us. We know he's been working hard even through some brief illness during this time. He's back to good health now, and we hope he knows we just want to keep hearing from him. It's very important to our members and all Newfoundlanders, Labradorians, that we keep hearing his voice.
Absolutely.
I know it's past 10:30.
I appreciate that. I appreciate doing this because I know you got great representation, but it's really nice to be here to do this directly with your board as well.
Good. We're glad you're here. We thank you for it, and we've had some of your colleagues, Minister Jolie, rather, not limited to her, speak to us, and we're glad you guys are reaching out across the country. I know it's just past 10:30 in Ottawa. You've got to go to the House. I'll leave it to you. Do you have any concluding remarks you would like to make to our members?
Yeah, I want to, first and foremost, I want to thank you, because I know how hard you work. I know how hard you work to build the business you have, and it's not easy. It's not easy in the best of times. And starting out with the storm as that hit at the beginning of 2020, and then this pandemic has made it very difficult for families and for Newfoundland and Labradors, and so my heart goes out to you, but know that we are working side by side, and you definitely have our commitment to just keep working to provide as to provide as much support as we can, but also to help in this exercise in the restart, so that I always sort of explain it this way. What's my job? It's to save as many businesses, save as many jobs as possible. It's to make sure that our supply chains globally is strengthened, so that you've got your seafood business is not just a domestic one; it's an international one. So to make sure that those supply chains continue and those markets continue, but to be Team Canada for each other, because I think that is just so important right now. And just know that we've got your back, and we're just going to have to keep working at this. And in this restart, I'd like the restart to not be wobbly, to be able to give you that support along the way. And sometimes it's not just money. We also just launched, I forgot to mention this, the Canadian Business Resilience Service. So for the next 4 weeks, 7 days a week, there is a hotline that is open. It is many of the sort of professional accountant advisories, because it's available to our smallest of businesses and our vulnerable businesses who otherwise would not be able to get those services of how to manage through tax regulations, how to manage through this recovery. So making sure that support is there as well. So I apologize, I don't have the hotline number, but I'll get it sent to you. That is going to help too, right? So it's part of it is money, but also it's just kind of being shoulder to shoulder, and just know that we're shoulder to shoulder with you.
Thank you. I know you've got to go. thank you so much for your time. If you don't mind, we may ask you to come back because
Sure.
it's 30 minutes, right?
Yeah, no, I know. You know what? I wish I could do these in longer. I mean, but I have to tell you, they never leave me that much time to do this, extra stuff. So, so I'd be happy to come back.
Okay, good.
All right.
I'm going to go do some extra stuff as well. I'm going to pass it back to our acting CEO, Rhonda. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Minister Ng. And we've been promoting the new business resilience service, and
Good.
we've been sharing that far and wide, and we'll continue to do so. Along with that, we're a couple of smaller relief programs, again, for 62 businesses across Canada to get the support of a $10,000 grant. So I want to make sure that is, so thank you, everyone, and thank you for your participation today. We're glad we can continue to have these conversations. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Minister.